Salam alaikum. The battle that changed European history forever, the Battle of Manzikert, 1071, it changed European history, and for that matter, it changed the Muslim history. Interestingly, this battle was not fought in Europe, but it's in a location, and Manzikert is in southeastern Turkey or north of Iraq. And at that time, that region was dominated by Byzantines or Romans, or Armenians for that matter as well. The characters in this story are three, mainly the Seljuk Sultan Alparslan, the Roman Emperor or Byzantine Emperor Romanos Diogenes. He's an important character in the story. And interestingly, the Seljuk Grand Vizier Nizam al-Mulk first time makes his own appearance in history in this battle or in association with Sultan Alparslan. Nizam al-Mulk is the legendary Grand Vizier in the Muslim world, perhaps the greatest ever. After the sultans or the leaders, Nizam al-Mulk plays a pivotal role in the shaping of Islamic civilization, Islamic culture, and I will touch on that as well a little bit briefly. The method that I follow in these historical videos is the method of Ibn Khaldun. He said that we don't just talk about history to tell us what happened. We look at the cause and effect, like what produced that moment in history. We need to look at that. Obviously, we need to know what has transpired, what happened, and also importantly, what are the implications of what happened. So that's what I will be covering in this video about Manzikert, the Battle of Manzikert, 1071, about 1,000 years ago. Now, let us first look at the context. What led to this battle? The Asia Minor is a region that the present-day Turkey is located. So this region was a seat of human civilization for a long time. So when Islam came, Islam grew northwards and also east and west, but it got stuck in the footsteps of Asia Minor. And the reason is that maybe there are several reasons. The first one is that there is a natural barrier, the Taurus Mountains that go from southeastern Turkey for a very large geography. It's a high mountains with a few passes. So you have to pass that in order to attack Romans or Byzantines. There was a natural barrier. Secondly, the Eastern Roman Empire became the Roman Empire when the western part of the Roman Empire collapsed in 476. So this legendary, the big Roman Empire was moved to east, centered in Constantinople. And so it was very important for Europe, Western civilization, to keep Roman Empire going. So there was a lot of resistance to Muslim, expansions into Asia Minor. So every time they tried that, it was stopped. So these are the couple of geographic reasons and the Roman Empire reasons. And Muslims also at the time in 10th century, 11th century were fragmented. So they couldn't really master a combined effort in order to capture, that was required to capture Asia Minor and then move into Europe from the east. I'm talking about this obviously from a historical perspective, what people want to do at the time. It doesn't mean, I'm personally endorsing these things or anything like that, so don't get me wrong. So that was the reasons why Muslims could not get into Asia Minor. Also on the eastern side, the Armenians were there for a long time. They're the indigenous people of that part. And they also defended their homeland quite vigorously. This all came to an end when Seljuks came to the scene. Now, in terms of the situation in the Muslim world at the time, as I said, that the Muslim world was fragmented. The Abbasid Caliphate kind of collapsed in a sense that it was no longer a powerful central authority with a huge army. It became more of a symbolic position, by 11th century. And also the Sunni Shiite tensions were really flaring at that time. this also, by the way, contributed to the fragmentation of the Muslim world at the time. Now, Egypt was ruled by Fatimids, which was a Shiite empire. The Buyids in Iran, they were in control. It was they say, like historians say, that 10th century was a Shiite century because they were dominant politically in the heartlands of the Muslim world. In terms of population, Sunnis were still majority, but in terms of politics and empires, Shiites became dominant. So all of that tension produced fragmentation in the Muslim world, which made it impossible to do anything, basically major, until Seljuks come to the picture. Like the Seljuks were Turks from Central Asia. They first appear in the scene in 1055. Tuğrul Bey comes to Baghdad and swears allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph. And Abbasid Caliph recognizes his legitimacy on the condition that he defends the caliphate, basically defends the Sunni Islam. So there's a bit of a deal struck between the Seljuk Tuğrul Bey and the Abbasid Caliph. And the Seljuks at the time, or the Turks from Central Asia, are very staunch Hanafi Muslims. They follow Hanafi school of law, and they also follow Imam Maturidi in theology, which Imam Maturidi's theology is linked to Abu Hanifa as well, the Hanafi school. So very much staunch, the Sunni Hanafi, the orientation at the time. So once Tuğrul Bey has this legitimacy and support of the Abbasid Caliph, he starts expanding and taking over these Iraq, Iran. The Seljuks become really dominant. And then he passes away. The Sultan Alparslan comes to the fore. He is the nephew of Tuğrul Bey. He wasn't in line for the throne. Tuğrul Bey leaves a child as a successor, and then there's a bit of a struggle for power, and eventually Alparslan becomes the supreme ruler in the Seljuk Empire. And he's 31 or 32 years old at the time, at the pinnacle of his, youth, power, and popularity. He was very popular. And then Muslim sources say that he was also very religious. He used to carry with him a judge, a scholar, all the time, that he would ask him for every decision that he made, is this Islamically correct? And so he would follow the advice of this scholar, or qadi, or judge in the Muslim world. So Alparslan takes power, and they have a vision. They have this mission to once again to dominate or spread the Abbasid Caliphate and the Sunni Islam in the Muslim world, or get rid of what was seen as the Shiite empires or the politics at the time. So for Alparslan, the Fatimids in Egypt and the Ismailis at the time also were a bit of a problem. They were the target. They were his enemies. And the Fatimids also didn't like this. They were attacking Syria, the Seljuk positions in Syria. So there was a lot of tension. So the last thing that Sultan Alparslan wanted to do was fight with the Romans. He didn't want that. He was actually at the time going to Syria, and then from there he was going to attack Egypt. So they do a bit of a deal, a treaty is signed between the Romanus Diogenes, the Roman emperor, and Alparslan. They sign a treaty, so that he doesn't want to fight. But the Romanus Diogenes, he has a problem with Alparslan and the Turks because they captured the Seljuk Turks captured the Armenian capital. This was a major blow to Armenia. Basically, that collapses the Armenian state in the eastern Turkey. So Roman emperor thought, okay, we represent Christianity, we have to defend the Christians, the Armenians. And he was also fearful that the next in line would be his territory. So he wanted to deliver a major blow or decisive victory to Turks or the Muslims at the time. That would mean his throne would be stable. It would give him legitimacy as the protector of the Christian world, save the Armenians. It sounded like a good project. So he raised a big army, and he moves east. And this is when Alparslan hears about his army coming. He makes a U-turn from Syria. He was going to attack Egypt, goes back to eastern Turkey at the moment, and they meet at the place of Manzikert. Now, the battle, what was the size of the army? So this is always a matter of contention in history books. According to the Arabic and the Turkish sources, the army of Romanus Diogenes was 200,000. It's always 200,000 for some reason. But the historians say that his army was more like 40, 50,000 people. And that's more like it. 40, 50,000 still is a major, big army for the time. And the Sultan Alparslan army is said to be between 20 and 30,000 soldiers. The thing is that army of this size is usually made up of a coalition army. So it's never from only one type of people. So in the army of the Roman Emperor were even Turks. There was some Christian Turks, Kipchaks or things like that branch of Turks, and Bulgarians, Georgians, Armenians. So it was an army made up of a coalition of the Christian forces at the time. And Sultan Alparslan as well, he had the army made up of, Arabs, Kurds, Turks. So it was a strong army as well. So they meet in this place, Manzikert, and the legend says it that Sultan Alparslan has appeared before his army wearing a shroud. He wasn't wearing a uniform, he was just wearing a white dress, symbolizing this shroud that I'm ready to die. Are you guys ready to die with me? Basically, that was a really good move on his part to really provide motivation to his soldiers. The thing with these ancient warfare is that because it's fought head to head or shoulder to shoulder, this fight and flight response in the human brain is triggered all the time. You're either fighting or you're running away. So psychology was very important at the time. So Sultan Alparslan plays with that psychology, and he's preparing his troops for fighting. And they prepared for fight. He led the morning prayer to the entire army. So basically, they feel that God is on their side, and they're ready for shahada, the martyrdom. Whereas in the army of Romanus Diogenes, it wasn't like that. It wasn't a unified army, and there were problems in that army. Anyway, they hit the battle, and in the end, Sultan Alparslan is victorious. And something that really interesting happens that has never happened in the history of clashes between Muslims and Christians, and that is, for the first time, a Roman emperor was captured alive by a Muslim army. It's never happened before, and it's never happened after that. So this was a major thing, and the way generally the sources say that Sultan Alparslan treated Romanus Diogenes very kindly, and he asked him, "What would you do if I was in your situation?" And he says, "I would do the worst. I would humiliate you, I would kill you." And Sultan Alparslan says, "I'm not going to do the same to you." Now, and then he stays for 5 days. They negotiate a bit of a settlement, a kind of a payment of a tribute, and for him to be released. And they agree on a sum, and then he's released. And Sultan Alparslan actually sends him back to Constantinople with 100 troops, elite troops. Very interesting. I think maybe you would wonder why that was the case. I mean, there's a chivalry aspect. The Muslim rulers like Salahuddin, Sultan Alparslan, and many others, they were chivalrous in victory, and this was a sign of that. But also, you can look at it from a political angle. That I don't think Sultan Alparslan wanted to fight the Byzantines for a long time, because if he was killed, if the Roman Emperor was killed, that would have angered the Europeans even, and the Byzantines, Romans, and that maybe they would rally a bigger army to come and attack. So he would have to contend with that all the time. But if he was to release him, he would go back, and then definitely that defeat would cause massive problems in the Byzantines or Roman state, and it did. When he released him, the whole empire was under turmoil economically and politically for a while. So that victory was made, and then Alparslan straight away goes to Fatimids, into Syria after he secured the east. Okay, so what are the consequences of the Battle of Manzikert? Because we started this video saying that it has changed the European history forever. And it did, and let me explain you why. For the first time, Muslims could now enter Asia Minor permanently with the Battle of Manzikert. Prior to that, it was always incursions. They go in, they go out. But now, after 4 years after the Battle of Manzikert, Süleyman Shah was another commander. He captures Iznik or Nicaea, which is in the footsteps of the Constantinople. So in 4 years, they go all the way there in the footsteps. So it's a major threat for the Byzantines or for Christians, and the Turkification of Asia Minor, the present-day Turkey, starts with the Battle of Manzikert. So there's nothing to stop Turks to go in and settle permanently, and it does. And so the Seljuks first establish. It's called the Seljuk or Rum. That area was called Rum at the time. So they settle that area, and then Ottoman Empire emerges from that. And the Ottoman Empire always went westwards into Europe, Balkans, Eastern Europe, and they even lay siege to Vienna. So the intent of the Ottoman Empire is to capture the entire Europe. And naturally, that has played a major part in European politics, European history, and that's why we say it changed Europe forever. So basically, Turkish and Muslim presence and push towards West causes major shifts in the European history. But that's not the only thing. There was that sort of comes about maybe over a number of centuries. So there's a momentum created, and that carries on a number of centuries until the fall of Constantinople in 1453, which I will discuss that in another video. That's also a significant event. And but before, there was more of an immediate impact of this Battle of Manzikert in European history, and that was the Crusades. Remember the dates: 1071, Battle of Manzikert. 4 years later, 1075, the Seljuk Turks are in the footsteps of Constantinople. They're not capturing it yet, but it's a major threat. So what happens is the Roman emperor at the time goes to Rome, the proper Rome, meets Pope and asks for help. He's saying Muslims are coming, they're going to come, they're going to enter Europe. If Constantinople is lost, Europe will open to Muslim onslaught. You got to stop. You got to help. So it takes a bit of a while for obviously the Pope to respond to that. Maybe like 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years. But the crusade starts in 1096. Now, I would think that the preparations for crusades even started before that, or the idea, the project of a crusade was born by the request for help of the Roman Emperor, Eastern Roman Emperor, because of the Turkish Muslim presence in Anatolia, which was started by the Battle of Manzikert. And obviously the Pope, if he says, all right, let's just help our brothers in Istanbul or Constantinople, no one's going to go. So he conjures up this idea that we have to capture Jerusalem. And the capture of Jerusalem becomes the big goal or the vision of the Crusades. Because, Jerusalem is sacred for Christians. It has many important historical and religious significance for Christianity and the emergence of Jesus and Christianity. So that the idea of capturing Jerusalem through Crusades was a major became major objective of Europeans. And that really, it made Europeans wake up to the world and see outside of the square, or as they say, outside of Europe for the first time, for a long time actually. Probably other than the Romans, which kind of collapsed in 476 in terms of Western Roman Empire, the Europeans never had any political aims and goals outside of Europe. So for the first time now, with 1096 Crusades, they began to do that. Capturing Jerusalem became the goal. And the immediate impact of that, that had two impacts. One is the science, the European access to science and enlightenment. Because when they came, they captured Jerusalem and the surrounding territory, and there's a very close interaction starts to take place between Muslims and Christians at the time. And we know this because some of the intellectuals, Adelaide of Bath, for example, who's known as the first English scientist, he writes a letter. In this letter that we have, he says, I decided to go and study Arabica, and he goes to Antioch. Antioch is just south of Turkey, or northwest of Syria, that region at Antakya or Antioch. He comes there to study in 10, so only about 15 years after the first crusade. So these crusades, and then he goes studies all these scientific books and takes a sackful of them to Europe, translates to Latin. That translation movement starts in Europe from Arabic, scientific books, philosophical books from Arabic into Latin, which really begins that scientific revolution, Reformation, Renaissance. All of that begin because of the Crusades. And the Crusades happened because of the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. So it's a major impact. It changes Europe forever, as we say. The second aspect, the impact of this, the idea of capturing Jerusalem, is that it makes Europeans try to get to Jerusalem in different ways. Because when they come through normal crusader routes, either by sea or land, it doesn't work. There's always Muslims there. It's difficult. Especially after 13th century, when Crusaders the Crusaders abandon Jerusalem or anywhere in the Middle East by 1261. They're out of there. So after that point, the Europeans are looking at, okay, how can we get to Jerusalem in different ways? how about we go around Africa into Red Sea, and then from the Red Sea to the Jerusalem is just a few hundred kilometers, and we can bypass Muslims. We can bypass by then Ottoman Empire is very strong. We can bypass the Ottomans. So this Portuguese actually achieved that for the first time. So when Portuguese had access to Indian Ocean, their idea was to capture Jerusalem through the sea, through Red Sea. But what they discover when they have access to Indian Ocean is, hey, there's a huge trade here that we can really profit. And they actually, Portuguese, stop all Muslim trade, the pilgrimage caravans, pilgrimage ships. They stop everything in a matter of 20 years at that time. There's a snowball effect from that, but my point is that once Europeans had access to Indian Ocean through rounding Africa, it changed their economy. And now, so Europeans were now awake in terms of like science, philosophy, enlightenment was coming, and then now also they had economic power, and they were discovering or having access to these trade routes and taking over from Muslims, which really also marks the end of the beginning of the end of the Muslim dominance as well. So it really changed. This Battle of Manzikert in 1071 is the beginning point for Europe to change forever, but also for Muslims to have now this Ottoman Empire is created after that. So it becomes one of the most dominant empires that Muslims have ever created. That's also a big impact for Muslims. But just coming back, the immediate impact of the Battle of Manzikert in the Muslim world is that Sultan Alparslan solidifies his rule. He only rules for about 11 years, but it's very consequential. He creates triples the size of the Seljuk Empire. And his son Melik Shah, after him, comes to the throne at the age of 18, and he rules for several decades, and he also is also very successful. So Seljuk Turks became dominant in the Middle East. So politically, Sultan Alparslan and after him Sultan Melik Shah, they dominate politically, and therefore through them the Sunni Islam becomes dominant politically as well. And that is a big reversal from previous century or previous 2 centuries when the Shiite political rule was the dominant. Also, the Sultan Alparslan with his Grand Vizier Nizam al-Mulk, they also embark on another project because they realize that you cannot just, I guess, I'm not here for the clashes, sectarian clashes, but it was in history, so you have to talk about it. So basically, they thought that, okay, Ismailis at the time were very influential in religious terms as well. They had a propaganda, and their ideas were spreading. Fatimas were not that much, but Ismailis were the main spreader of the Shiite ideas and orientation of Islam. So in order to combat that, they realized that they have to think about an educational system. So this is when the Nizamiya Madrasas come in. So the Nizamiya Madrasa, the name comes from Nizam al-Mulk. So he's the one, the madrasas are the brainchild of Nizam al-Mulk and Sultan Alparslan. They come up with this project of building. The idea is to build a massive madrasa or educational institution in Baghdad, in the capital city, and that every Muslim student, anyone who's going to have an imam role or qadi, judge role, anywhere in the Muslim world should be the graduate of this main institution. So they have really poured a lot of money into this, and students from all over the Muslim world started to come and then when they graduated from these madrasas, they went back to their own countries and established a mini version of this madrasa. So the madrasa style of education system really spread with Nizam al-Mulk and Sultan Alparslan's project. And this is when Nizam al-Mulk calls Imam Ghazali. Imam Ghazali, this brilliant young scholar, he brings him in as the head teacher of Nizamiya Madrasa. Because, like, yes, Imam Ghazali was brilliant, but he was also young. He wanted to really reach out to the younger generation of the Muslim scholars so that they can, spread this madrasa education, across the Muslim world. Now, the madrasa education, it wasn't just, obviously, they weren't just trying to make it a political thing or Sunni dominance. They also wanted to produce an enlightened, generation. They wanted to spread literacy across the Muslim world, but also the curriculum of this madrasa had religious, sciences, and also the physical sciences of their time. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and other sciences were being taught as well. So it was a really revolutionary, very innovative educational system that was started and spread across the Muslim world, and it changed Muslim world forever. And we could say that, I guess, the Sultan Alparslan, who's the victor at Battle of Manzikert, and his upcoming, vizier was at the time with him. So those two start something revolutionary in the Muslim world, and that changes Muslim world forever as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. We talked about the Battle of Manzikert, how it changed Europe forever and Muslim world forever. And I'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum.